performance, but I will use the term market share as one indicator, perhaps an important one, in understanding or measuring agriculture cooperative performance. There are a few exceptions, and we will hear about them throughout this conference. But in general, we see agriculture cooperatives maintaining or increasing their market shares. We see considerable consolidation, not only at the cooperative level, but at the member level in those who own and control agriculture cooperatives. So we're seeing a double consolidation phenomenon happen. We're seeing globalization having both negative and positive impacts on agriculture cooperatives. Some, in general, exporting, importing, and strategic alliances appear to be the commercial strategies with the most success. Foreign direct investment by cooperatives in other countries, which is the primary commercial strategy of investor-owned firms, is much more limited in cooperatives. In food cooperatives, and here, I don't know a lot, and I don't study a lot about food cooperatives outside of the United States. But in the United States, food cooperatives have really gotten their act together in the last 15 years. And we're seeing a really interesting increase in not only market share, but in professionalism, which in a sense hits a plateau or a platform by which they will, you'll see them consistent, expand, given the consumer trends that we see happening in perhaps the consumer habits of the industrialized countries. I'll make a few comments on cooperative education, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have 10 quotations from cooperative leaders that I have heard in the last 20 days. And they lay out, in a sense, a research agenda for us. And I'm looking at, I'm assuming that everyone in this room is either a researcher or a communicator of research results, or is a collector of issues in cooperatives and passing them back to the research community, or is a practicing or a practicing knowledge disperser, extension, teaching, outreach, member relations. So those are the assumptions I'm using with respect to my remarks today. With respect to cooperative education, and I'll take, again, I'm taking a North American view here. By the way, for those of you who are not from North America, I think you would be shocked at how important cooperatives are in North America. I spend much of my time traveling around the world, and many people, professionals, are shocked by the degree of importance of cooperatives in general and agriculture and food cooperatives in North America. That's, I'll leave it at that. If you have questions, I can answer. Cooperative education. We are seeing an increased demand for sophisticated training in the industrialized countries regarding agriculture cooperatives. What has happened is most agriculture cooperatives cooperatives are 80 to 100 years old. And when you reach that level of maturity, that organization becomes increasingly complex. And this, the demand for cooperative education is no longer purely basic. It is at a much higher level. And again, when we get to the points made or quotes that I'm going to use, you will see some evidence of that. Number two, we're seeing an increase in interest in internationalization of cooperative education. Directors and managers of cooperatives now understanding that we have much to learn from other cooperative movements, cooperative entities, and cooperative leaders. So we are seeing a genuine interest in global exchanges and global comparisons between producer-owned and controlled collective action cooperatives, all right? We are seeing resources going into, public resources going into cooperative education in Europe and in North America decreasing. This is, I'm saying public resources going into cooperative research, cooperative training, etc., decreasing. Simultaneously, we're seeing at least the entrepreneurial researchers and dispersers of knowledge become much more entrepreneurial in how they, let's say, invest and participate in communicating with cooperative leaders. So this is an interesting challenge. This is different in the developing world, where you see multilateral efforts yet very interested in collective action or investing in cooperative research or cooperative knowledge dispersion. But in the industrialized world, we're seeing it takes entrepreneurial energy by professors, by groups, to attract monies into this area. We are seeing a broadening of the definition of what cooperative is around the world, particularly in agriculture. We're seeing the terms farmer-owned businesses, farmer-owned associations, cooperatives, but many terms. We probably in this room, if we had time, there are probably 10 different terms used by what traditionally we use for what we call an agriculture cooperative. The point here is, and we'll get into the research points, how do we define a cooperative? And so, at least in agriculture, that's an interesting and challenging subject. In North America, again, we are seeing a significant interest by undergraduate students and graduate students in collective action and cooperatives. It's a very refreshing, our administrators don't know what to do because they see these students really interested in collective action, cooperatives, etc. Relative to perhaps other areas of study. And it might indicate, and I think it does, what's happening with the youth of today, what they see as societal problems, and that I believe they feel some form of collective energy, collective attitudes will serve them well in the future. And these students are very serious. So those are my opening and general comments. Now, with respect to the facts, if you expected to see a beautiful display of Euresis numbers of agriculture cooperatives and co-ops around the world, I advise you to go to the World Monitor and go to their website. They do a beautiful job of it. There's no one in this audience that needs to see that in a presentation like this. There are too many intellectuals, too many very insightful people in this audience to do something that you could do with it. And you're probably doing it right now, laptops, looking at that. And ICA played a really major role in fostering this very difficult challenge of collecting data about cooperatives throughout the world. And I think we should support and congratulate them for that. Some interpretation of those numbers was presented at the International Summit in Quebec in 2014, and going to that website, I think you will find yourself engaged for many, many, many days. There's so much on that, and there are a number of people here who were very involved with that. What I thought I could bring to this group is to draw from my own experiences. I have, personally, I have a very privileged position where I'm allowed to run around the world and listen to you and listen to others. I don't have to teach a lot. I conduct institutes. I have a marvelous group of current and former graduate students who do a lot of work. We have a wonderful network of visiting scholars, and we have a wonderful network of research colleagues. So what I thought I would do today is, just in the last 20 days, I've been involved in a workshop at the World Bank. I've been involved in the Graduate Institute of Co-op Leadership. I've been involved with more than 30 calls from either CEOs or leading co-op managers from around the world on specific issues. And so what I'll do is just take quotes, selected quotes, that I think in your eyes will lead to perhaps a research interest that might turn on a light. These comments or quotes are coming from real practitioners. That's my whole objective here, is can we draw our research ideas at least from interested parties. And so that's what I'm going to attempt to do in the time remaining. So number one, this comes from a brand new senior vice president of a regional agriculture cooperative in the south of the United States. And this person asked me to become involved in a project. It's a federated cooperative, meaning federated in US American English means tier 2. It's owned by local cooperatives, so primary co-ops. And what's happening is the primary co-ops are starting to compete with each other. And they're turning against their own young, in a sense. And people at the second level are saying, how can we minimize this friction and increase efficiency? And so they have been discussing for 2 or 3 years internally, what might they do? And as you can imagine, the leaders of locals do not want to give up their authority, their power, and of course they think people in the second tier are attempting to take over. This person who called me had been a primary manager, had been a general manager of a primary cooperative, the largest one in this federation. And he said, Mike, why have, because he's been assigned to deal with this issue. They just hired him at the second tier because the second tier thinks he can be trusted by the first tier. And he raises the issue, this question: why have agriculture cooperatives lasted so long? Why have agriculture cooperatives lasted so long? And of course, I'm sitting by my computer and I'm looking and I just don't find any articles that take at least that question. You know, why are year after year now in the US, I'm being invited to 20 invitations to attend the 100th anniversary of cooperatives, of this cooperative, that cooperative, etc. Or the 80th or the 90th. Why? We have a tendency as researchers to want to explore any cooperative that has failed. But he's asking this he's new to his position, and he's asking the question, those that have survived, those that have succeeded, why have they succeeded? And this is a challenge. Each of these quotes is a challenge to us as researchers, or educators, or communicators. It's a beautiful question. Why have they lasted so long? When the average of an investor-owned firm, the life of an investor-owned firm in the United States is 18 years. The average life. All right? So why cooperatives so long? Okay. So that's question number one. And it's a research challenge to all of us. My response is, I said, Joe, his name was Joe, I said, go back to the history and look at what did they do right at the beginning. What did they do right at the beginning? You will see something that ties all 10 of these quotes together, is that history matters. History really matters. But the history of a given group really matters. And how do we extract usability from the past? How do we sift chaff from the real wheat on the usability of the past? Where you just don't get pages and pages of that past, but you extract what might be of importance from that past. It was interesting because this cooperative that I was talking with was well known for its criticism of other successful cooperatives. So I'm raising this question, is why do we criticize cooperatives who are successful? Is it because they've transgressed the norm of our own definition? Or we don't particularly like the leaders? But we hear much criticism of successful cooperatives. And this is an interesting, I think it's an interesting question for those of us that all of you are opinion makers. We are all opinion makers. And we, I think, we carry much more responsibility than perhaps we are aware of, that we have to be very careful in as criticizing success. All right? Third question. What do we really know about the factors that lead to success? Now, probably, I don't know the percentage of disciplines in the audience, if you're a sociologist or a political scientist or an economist or an applied economist or an econometrician or a management scholar. Cooperatives are not only inter and multidisciplinary, they are even more complex than the normal business organization or economic organization or social organization. They are more complex than what we normally study. So you must we have to raise to another power the degree of complexity. And so that takes very sophisticated tools, very sophisticated ex-ante type thinking before we engage in research, instead of just looking at the financials and say they had a high degree of cash flow, therefore they were successful. Okay, this is a really important question, because if you think about it, to understand the factors that lead to success, we probably need to understand much more about the makeup of the members, and the members' objective functions, and the members' attributes, than we do of just the entity itself. And so this whole issue of what factors lead to success, when preparing research or thinking about attempting to answer that question, we really have to spend much more time on the ex-ante preparation for our investigation. And of course, we have to spend much more time. We might need more sophisticated tools if it is more complex than traditional organizations or single objective function organizations. This is a question from a CEO of a medium-sized agriculture co-op in the upper Midwest in the US. Why do we not have more women cooperative leaders in agriculture in the developed countries? Why do we not have more women cooperative leaders in agriculture in the developed world? Actually, we know much more, in my opinion, about gender issues in the developing world than we do in the developed world. It's a question. This question was asked to me in front of the chairwoman of the largest agriculture co-op in the US. And she stands alone, okay? Of any cooperative larger than $50 million in the US, she is the only one, okay? And she smiled, she more than smiled, when someone suggested that perhaps men are not so stupid after all. Farmers, their greatest wealth is back home, and they leave the most important person in charge of their wealth. Interesting comment. But it's an interesting question that I have not seen in the developed world, at least English writing. And so it's really interesting. We have very, very few. 2 days later, I was with the CEO of the second largest agriculture co-op in the US, and he said, we're always discussing this issue and we're always told that over time it will happen. He said, we don't have time for it to happen. We have to think way outside of the box to address this issue. We really need, we are leaving at least 50% of the knowledge untapped in this country, in agriculture. And so, yes, I think I know a number of you here, and you spend a lot of time mandated by the World Bank and FAO and every other NGO to do gender studies in the developing world. We really must do them in the advanced or the industrialized countries. You go to Norway's solution, mandatory 40% women on boards. What are, and by the way, that was a radical, we're not gonna wait another 50 or 100 years. So that question is being constantly superficially discussed in the agriculture co-ops. And notice in my question, it was in agriculture co-ops in the developed world. It didn't say credit unions, it didn't say other types of cooperatives, where you see a much greater percentage of females in the leadership position. So this is an intriguing question. How important is the concept of purpose? How important is the concept of purpose? Not mission, not values and beliefs, not vision, purpose. If you think about it, if you know the history of your organization or an organization you are studying, what was the purpose for that first group to get together? And if it was very long ago, it was very costly to do that. Organization is costly, very costly. It's interesting, last year in